These guys are the unseen pit crew for FlyingRC.net. On the left is Mike, who often checks over my new planes for errors. Among other things, Mike also backed me up on a buddy box when I was doing my chemo. On the right is Clark, who's been the de facto cameraman for FlyingRC.net. He's been behind the camera on virtually all of the flight videos over the last 3 or 4 years. But now he gets to be in front of the camera when he does his first flights on his new Top-Flite P47. Mike did the maiden flights on Clark's P47, but today Clark is going to do the takeoffs and landings on his own. Here Mike is pointing out a couple of tips on getting a tail dragger warbird into the air. Mike and I really are sincere and are trying to help Clark with this new plane. But all that won't stop us from harassing him a little bit, especially if he's not looking at the moment. Mike decided to let Clark go out on the field to get behind his P47 for the first takeoff or two. And lacking anybody that can actually do this, I decided to handle the camera for Clark's initial flights. And not wanting to be ridiculed anymore, Clark just gassed it and took off. Mike and I have been harassing Clark about not flying his P47, and this sure isn't going to stop us from harassing him. And as Mike and I suspected all along, Clark handled flying the P47 very well. Clark's been flying one of my old AeroWorks 60cc Extra 260 freestyles, and he's been doing good with that. With that experience, he's got a good idea what a giant scale plane looks like in the air. And before long, he was doing loops and rolls with his P47 and just generally shaking it out a little bit. And as you might suspect, his first high-speed low passes weren't all that low. By the time he got into his third flight with this plane, his low passes were getting a whole lot lower. People with warbird experience know that probably the hardest thing to do with any of them is landing them. So before too long, we encouraged Clark to start making some landing approaches to get the feel of that. Even Clark's early approaches to the field were very well done. He got caught a little high or a little fast a couple of times, but overall his approaches are really good right from the start, and this is one of them. We didn't even bother asking if this was an intentional touch and go, because even if it wasn't, Clark would tell us that he's got skills, and yes, it was intentional. And we'll give him this one, because this one did look intentional, even if it was a little bit slow up there for a little while. And Clark was doing a good job of controlling the tail when he had the mains on the ground. He never did nose this plane over during the first day. And here's his first real landing. Again, he did a really good job and kept the plane nice and level after it got on the mains. It's kind of a tradition with RCers that you don't take photos of you with the plane until after you've flown it successfully. Looks like Clark has practiced posing like this with his plane. Starting these big gasser engines can take a little getting used to. Mike and I usually stand around watching to see how long it is before Clark decides that maybe using the choke would be a good idea. I suspect that both Mike and I have been flipping a plane like this on and on until our arm got tired and nobody told us to choke it, so that's the treatment Clark gets. This is a brand new motor in this plane, so as he gets some time on it, starting it will get easier, but we won't tell him that. We're thinking of starting a pool based on how many flips Clark does before he reaches for the choke. Clark's got starting skills. This is Clark's first takeoff from behind the pilot's fence. Clark is still jerking this thing off of the ground a little too early in the takeoff run. The superb handling qualities of the Top-Flite P47 are partially responsible for this plane not crashing. Try taking off a little early with something like a Corsair and things could be a whole lot different. Right now Clark might be thinking that his newfound warbird skills might prevent us from harassing him. No such luck. Clark had gone out into the woods to find a hatch cover for my P47 once, so he was going to make sure that his wasn't going to fly off. And Mike decided we needed to see this tape that he used. Yeah, we got skills too. After some more general flying with the loops and rolls, we encouraged Clark to start making some landing approaches again to get used to this thing. Clark's been doing a great job of flying, but Mike and I know that it takes a little bit to get used to landing one of these things, and we wanted him to do that while the conditions were pretty good. On this approach, Clark grabbed a little too much elevator and the plane stood up, but he didn't try to go ahead and land it. He gassed it and went around just like he should. There's a whole lot of people that needed a crash to convince them that going around was a better idea than trying to force a landing. This is the very next approach, and Clark proves to himself right here that going around was a great idea, because this plane came in with no damage and stayed that way. During 4 flights, this is as close to the P47 came to nosing over. Clark didn't panic, he let it roll out, and then right at the end he turned it around. The bad news for Mike and I is that Clark just might have some skills, and we're going to have to figure out a way of shooting that down.